live from New York City at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on black. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. First, I would like to apologize for starting off a little bit later than usual. I think just, I guess like everybody else. We do have a program, a very interesting program. You may have received an invite, an announcement, or some sort of message that's to the effect this program is not suitable for everyone. No, it's not X-rated, but it does require a great deal of patriotism. It does require a great deal of common sense. Now, if you join us for the first time, once again, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you have joined us before, thank you for being here. This program is not for our It's not for us to just do something because we have nothing else to do. The Fourth Branch program was actually conceived more than a decade ago, but it's a lot of years since we started actually implemented some of the ideas behind this program. Now, what is it about? In one sentence, we would say that the Fourth Branch program is a venue that we use in order to perfect the union. That would be the most simplistic, not simplistic, the most direct explanation for this program. Now, the implementation is actually a little different. Well, a little bit more complex, I should say. Why? Because obviously one of the biggest obstacles to perfect the union, I don't know if you recall that almost, well, every year for quite a few decades now, there have been the custom of the President of the United States, whoever that individual happened to be, and whichever party, and irrespective of party, there is always a State of the Union address, and the purpose of which is to tell the country how well the union is doing. And the goal has always been to perfect the union. Now, it's a bunch of words because politicians use that platform, especially presidents use that platform in order to address the whole nation at the time that most people would actually spend some time to listen to what the president will be saying. Beyond the State of the Union address, which is a speech, and there is always a lot of tidbits of politics in it. In the past, that particular moment in time was used to tell the nation that this is your president proposing to do X, Y, Z, B, C. And usually, if the individual is really interested in advancing the affairs of the country, not just making political point, the individual would flesh out, or at the very least give an idea as to the proposal that he has as to how that's going to be implemented. Of course, that is also the platform for the individual in question, the president, to tell you how much they have already accomplished from what they promised when they bidded for the office of the presidency. For over 2 centuries, we're still talking about affecting the union. Now, there is nothing wrong with that because one can always improve. But if we take a look back in time, in history, and take a look today, we are actually going backwards. And there is a reason for that. Now, before it's lost in the conversation, that this segment, we usually have 3 segments. Segment 1, in which we read the Mueller report. We will be doing that shortly. Segment 2, that's where we address a topic of importance. In segment 3, if there is some news that worth mentioning or talked about, we usually do that in segment 3. Now, for the days, a couple of weeks now, we've been combining segment 1 and 2, segment 3 and 2, and pretty much have 2 segments instead of 3. We will obviously go to the template, which is the 3 segment. Usually with 3 segments, we have 30 minutes each segment, and it happened at 10 o'clock, segment 1, at 12 o'clock, segment 2, and at 2 o'clock, segment 3. We combine those 2. Segment 2, which is the only segment left after segment 1, is, of course, start at 1 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock. And we expect today that's going to be the case as well. I started saying that instead of the union being perfected, we, in terms of the country, we seem to be going backwards. Now, the country is divided, obviously, in 2 major political parties, and within both parties, there are different groups with different interests. But for decades now, the Republican Party has done extremely well. Not because they're doing so many good things, mind you, but because the Republicans, both legislature and constituent alike, they move as one party, no matter what. That's why you may remember that during Bush administration, George W. Bush, he had some words, he had some difficulty with those words. And as such, when he was giving a speech, it was the State of the Union, but he used the word nuclear. Now, the words actually he wanted to pronounce was nuclear, but it's a nuclear. You could bring this new word as a attribute for nuke. But such words didn't exist. I don't know if they have added it to the dictionary, because the update in the dictionary sometimes bring new words into added to the dictionary, because as time goes by, custom, environment, culture, etc., there are new words that will be coming forth, and of course, adding it to the dictionary, there is nothing wrong with that. But the bottom line is, and the argument, the point I'm trying to make is, when Mr. Bush nuclear, because he could not pronounce nuclear, for for the remaining of his term in office, all the Republicans, without exception, adopted and were saying nuclear. And the reason is because they all move as one block. So there is no disparity, there is no variety, there is nobody pushing back. And of course, that's a small thing. Having difficulty with a word, that's the last thing in the world that I would want to address. But I wanted to make the point that Republicans do not have, especially Republican constituents, they rely exclusively on their legislators to show the way, and that's where we begin of moving as one block. Now, in the Democrat Party, don't have to preach you about that. Democrats are pretty divided. Now, that's good for democracy. Now, there are certain aspects that whatever the party is trying to achieve that require some sort of consensus for everyone to be on the same page. That's fine if you want to move a proposal, a policy, whatever it is, then people have to come to an agreement. This is what ought to be done. But in general, Democrats, Republicans, and that is actually very good for our democracy, because you have different groups saying different things about a particular topic. So that's good for debate. Now, in the North, unfortunately, it is division within the Democrat Party. This is actually, if those individuals reporting the news about this state of affairs, in fact, that's something that needs, and Republicans need to adopt as well, because this is extremely good for democracy, that you don't have everybody agreeing to everything when in fact they do not agree with it, but they're all moving. That's very bad for our democracy. So Democrats have always been that way, and it requires a lot of juggling of ideas, juggling of interests, the Democrat Party, in order to get something done. That's why you see today Nancy Pelosi has to be really a shrewd politician in order to keep everybody focused in one thing based on what she has in mind in terms of goal, in terms of objective. Now, why is it bad for Republicans? Now, let's take a look at what has been happening. Now, you may know that Donald Trump, during the 2016 presidential election, mentioned that he loves stupid people. The one saying that, it did say that, uneducated people. Now, we shrug that off. Donald Trump being Donald Trump. Now, you could have shrugged that off, but he meant it. The unfortunate part is the fact of what I just said, that the Republican Party moves as a bloc, and no matter what their leaders do, however bad it is for the country, they still continue to move as a bloc. And that's why I said it is bad for democracy. Because democracy needs people who can think for themselves, people who can challenge their leaders, people who, when they see that their leader gone astray, they can bring the individual back so that they can do things that are beneficial for the country, not just for a political party, for the country. Unfortunately, in the Republican, Those people don't exist anymore. Today we have one individual who is considered an outcast within the party because he happened to make the decision to stand for what is right. We are talking about the Senator Amidst. He is the only Republican who, after reading the Mueller report, said it is time to impeach Donald Trump. Now, because the whole Republican Party, legislators and constituents alike move as a bloc, they don't care the kind of damages Donald Trump is doing to the country. They don't care the fact that Donald Trump has been really jeopardizing our national security. They don't care that Donald Trump is destroying the very fabric of our institution. Is shredding the Constitution, trampling the rule of law. They don't care about that because they're all moving as a bloc. And as far as they are concerned, the country can burn down, go to hell, as long as they move as one bloc. That's why you see people like Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Devin Nunes, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, they all speaking one language and follow them because their constituents do not think for themselves or maybe cannot think for themselves. So when Donald Trump says he loves uneducated people, he wasn't making a joke. Say to yourself, I'm not uneducated, I have a college degree. In fact, most of my interaction with my fellow Republicans are with people who have a college degree, some master, some PhD, and yet it is mind-boggling to me as to the fact that those individuals cannot really make any kind of decision for themselves. You see, no one can explain being smart by acting like a fool and speaking like an idiot. No one can claim to be a smart individual and be that way. Now, why do I care? I wouldn't care except for one problem. You see, democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. It just cannot. Dictators, authoritarian, rely on people being ignorant, not knowing what happened, not knowing the truth. Dictators, authoritarian, really strive on that. That's why if you pay any attention to history, you would notice that those individuals, in order for their regime to survive, they have to control sources of information, the media. Because they love people staying in ignorance. If you only get information from them, you only hear about what they're doing, so you only hear good things about them, then everything is fine. You see, democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. Your legislators rely on misleading you, misinforming you, and what's sweet for them, they found a source to spread that kind of false hope. Facts amplify whatever that they say, which is false, whatever that they conceive or perceive as what they want to convey to you. Fox amplifies it, and it becomes what you think is the truth. A couple of weeks ago, an individual Republican was at the state of affairs in Washington about the Mueller report. And the lady said that, I thought Robert Mueller exonerated Donald Trump. That's the only thing. And she was very genuine. You could tell she wasn't just trying to say those things. Those are the kind of people, the kind of information that they expose to, false information, and they go about their lives thinking everything is fine. Now, how do you think that lady was the exception? Of course not. She lives in an environment that's the only thing she hears from Fox, from all those individuals going on Fox and telling those kind of information in order to make those people believe that the only problem the country has is the other side, meaning the Democrats. Now, that did not start with Donald Trump, but Donald Trump has exacerbated the problem. You see, in order to change any situation, first, the problem has to be acknowledged. And the biggest problem the country has is you have a whole political party whose leaders, if we can call those individual leaders, because the leaders is not supposed to deceive their followers. A leader is not supposed to mislead his or her followers. But unfortunately, that's what you have exclusively in the Republican Party, that people who are supposed to be leaders, they make it a matter of business to deceive their constituents. They have right to everything. The rationale today for you, if you have not heard from your Republican legislators, or you've been only watching Fox and you think that Mueller exonerated Trump, no, Mueller did not. In fact, Mueller found that Donald Trump is a crook, a scoundrel, and he has jeopardized the country, but he has also committed crimes. Now, if we put the Mueller report aside for a moment, Michael Cohen is now sitting for activities that he had performed for Donald Trump and lying about doing those activities. Now, think about that for a moment. You're working with and for, and that person is in jail. Does that tell you anything, or is it too complicated for a mind to grasp? So yes, Donald Trump is by definition a criminal. And as Mueller explained in the report, had there not been those rules at the Department of Justice that prevents a sitting president from being indicted today, Donald Trump would have been indicted like any other criminal. The only reason that did not happen, is because there are rules, not even in the Constitution, but rules by the Department of Justice that says no sitting president can be indicted. And that's the reason Donald Trump gets himself involved in all kind of illegal activities, because he is literally immune of being indicted, of being charged with criminal activities, but he is the president of the United States. Now, think about that for a moment. The person who is supposed to be regarded with the highest esteem, the person who is supposed to have, at the very least, the highest integrity, that person is a criminal, but cannot be indicted because of his post, of the post he occupied. Now think about that for a moment. And this is the person that your Republican congressmen and senators are out there defending. And I ask any of them to answer this simple question. Would you use Donald Trump as for your children or your grandchildren? Knowing he's a crook, he's a liar, he's a scoundrel, he's a fraud, he committed crimes. Would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children? No Republican who has even the lowest level of decency would answer yes to that. And notice what I said. The lowest level of decency. And the reason is very simple. You have an individual you're supporting as president of the United States, but who cannot be a role model for your children or your grandchildren. You don't have to be a genius. That doesn't make any sense. To have a president that you cannot be proud of and say to your children, I want you to be just like that guy. Now don't get me wrong, there are a few fools who would say yes. And notice I say fools. But no decent and individual in the United States of America would even flinch to say no, they would not consider Donald Trump as a role model for their children or their grandchildren. No one. Give any individual, anyone, pause as to how could you support an individual that you cannot use, an individual who has the highest office in the land. You not be able to say to your children, I want you to grow up to be just like that individual. If you cannot do that, I'm not saying that as an answer so that you can get rid of the individual. If you cannot internalize that answer and believe that you really mean that you want your little Joey to be just like Donald Trump, then you have to realize that you have a serious problem within yourself, because that's a conflict. To have a president you cannot be proud enough of to use as a role model for your children. And that is the individual your Republican legislators are pushing you to defend and to support. Something is definitely wrong with the Republican Party. Now, Donald Trump relies exclusively on the ignorance of the constituent, the people who support him, in order to continue to do what he has done. Either earlier or yesterday, Donald Trump gave an interview in which he said he would accept dirt from a foreign government on his opponent. The same that investigated that all the Republicans are defending him, he didn't flinch. On camera, he said he would accept that. And you have your Republican legislator out there defending that individual who is the president of the United States, who doesn't have any sense of decency, any loyalty to the country. but using you, the constituent, the supporters, in order to continue to do what is beneficial to him privately. As I already mentioned, Donald Trump doesn't do anything for you. Anything that Donald Trump does is for his benefit. If you see that you get something out of that, do not be quick to praise Donald Trump, because Donald Trump doesn't have you in mind. And if you think he does, you fall right into the very trap that he already set, that he takes you for a stupid individual. Think about it. He's a guy who bid for the highest office in the land, enlisted the help of foreign government, foreign entities, including our enemy Russia. Now, because the investigator could not establish direct connection, not that there were none, because if you read the Mueller report, you would know that there were plenty of connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. But because of his post, the President of the United States, you have to be able to establish the link directly. Otherwise, you cannot put that on the individual. And that's why I decided to read the Mueller report for you to hear for yourself, instead of hearing people talking about it. Now, because that could not be established, now he is publicly saying to the nation, I wasn't caught, I'm willing to do it again. And that is the guy you consider fit for the Oval Office. It is mind-boggling to me in general every time I speak with a Republican. In Quora, which I publish some of my work, and I also exchange ideas with others, including Republicans. You always hear the argument that Republicans believe that Democrats think they are ignorant. And they have an issue with that. No one can explain being smart by acting like a fool and speaking like an idiot. In other words, you cannot expect people to think of you as someone who is smart when you're doing all the wrong things. And you're saying all the wrong things. Not even logical. Now listen to this. We will come back to continue the reading of the report shortly after this thought. Here's what's currently going on in the Republican circle. Legislators, those individuals that you consider smart enough to represent you in Washington, Republican legislators, now their argument against the Mueller report is the following. It started on wrong premises. What they really say, it doesn't matter that Mueller found that uncovered a lot of crime. It doesn't matter that Mueller found that the president committed crime. None of that matters, because as far as they are concerned, the investigation should happen. That's their argument. Now, if you're a smart person, you have to start realizing that Republicans are really, really, really dumb. Because if they're buying that argument from the representative, then can you really believe that this individual is a smart individual, being able to see through that those legislators, those representatives are actually misleading them. Now, here's what it means. Your neighbor calls 911 to report noise next door. I'm going to label you neighbor B. So neighbor A call 911 for label B, for neighbor B, because there is noise next door. So dispatch check that out. When police officer came, there was no noise. But by sheer luck, one of the police officers peeked through the crack of the door and saw inside pile of weapon, pile of cash, drugs. There are a lot of activities going on inside that place that clearly say it's criminal. So the police officer decided to arrest you for that. Now I fast forward all the detail behind the conversation and so on and so forth. So you get arrested, and your attorney's defense, you're arrested on wrong premise. The reason is because neighbor A, your neighbor, called about noise, neighbor B, and the cop got there and there was no noise. But arrest you because you're in possession of drugs, doing money laundering, pile of weapons, so a lot of illegal activity. So those are wrong premise to be arrested, because that's not what the call was about. The Republican legislators are arguing today. They're not saying there is no crime. They're not arguing there is no crime, because they acknowledge there are crimes. But what they're saying is, because the investigation started on wrong premise, then we cannot charge the president with crimes, even if we see crimes. That's what your Republican Party has become. A bunch of people giving you a bunch of false logic in order for you to go along and continue to support them. That's your leaders today. Now, the constituent, now the leaders are advancing this logic, which is warped by any analysis. It is warped. Crimes are crimes, no matter how it's discovered. So you find the individual sitting in the Oval Office is a criminal, but your Republican legislator is saying, well, the investigation shouldn't have happened because it started on wrong premise, which, in other words, the police officer who arrested you because of all these illegal activities did that on wrong premise, because he came to investigate noise. There was no noise, then no matter what kind of crime he saw, he should have just walked away. That's your Republican legislature. The people you elected to represent you are telling you that that's the way it is, then Donald Trump should be off the hook. That in the meantime, the Republican constituents on the street are advancing another interesting defense for Donald Trump. They said Democrats would have done the same thing. They don't see the stupidity in that defense. First, even the defense that they're advancing tell them what they did was wrong, because they much because they say Democrat. Their defense now is saying, well, that's fine because Democrat would have done the same thing. Yeah, we know it's wrong. We shouldn't have done it, but Democrat would have done the same thing if offered the opportunity. Selling, collaborating with a foreign enemy is okay, and Democrat would have done it, so you're fine with doing it? That's your defense? But for sake of no, Democrat would not have done it. In fact, I strongly urge you to visit the peoplebranch.org website. I just published an article in which I gave scenarios, I gave details of information about the fact that three times, Democrats candidates for president were approached by the same country, Russia. And all three times, Democrats say, no thanks. No, Democrats would not have done it. Republican, this is not a defense. And no, Democrats would not have done it because they proved, not once, not twice, but three times. And they even went as far as showing that they would not have accepted dirt from anyone, regardless of who that person is. In fact, or receive dirt in the form of document about George W. Bush that during the 2000 election. You know what it did? It turned it over to FBI. So Republican. First, it's not a defense to think that because Democrats would have done it, it's okay, because that shows your lack of patriotism. And second, no, Democrats would not have done it because they proved times that they do not do that because they are patriots, not by saying they are patriots, but by acting like patriots. So the idea that you can claim you're doing all the things that damage our country, it is something that you ought to re-examine. Because it's either you don't know what patriotism is, or you simply don't care. Because what you did was wrong. Some of you, I understand, did that, support Russia unknowingly. You did not know that you were supporting Russia. I understand that. But there are people in the camp who knew what they were doing. And that's what the Mueller report is about. When we come back, we'll continue the reading of the Mueller report. If you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged. Because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican. Because the very reason that our democracy survived is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. You're okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give or who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot. We are reading the Mueller report, reading about George Papadopoulos, one of the individuals who worked in the 2016 presidential campaign for Donald Trump, and he at some point was by Robert Mueller. He spent a week in jail to have lied initially to the special counsel. Later campaign and removal from the campaign. In July 2016, After returning from Russia, Page traveled. Well, actually, it is about Page. We did conclude the reading about George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, that is. In July 2016, after returning from Russia, Page traveled to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. While there, Page met Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak. That interaction is described in Volume 1, Section 4.A.6.A infra. Page later emailed campaign official with feedback he said he received from ambassador he had met at the convention, and he wrote that Ambassador Kislyak was very worried about Clinton's worldview. The next three sentences in this paragraph have been redacted by jury. Following the convention, Page's trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russia foreign policy drew the media's attention and began to generate substantial press coverage. The campaign responded by distancing itself from Page, describing him as an informal foreign policy advisor who did not speak for Mr. Trump or the campaign. On September 23rd, Yahoo News reported that U.S. intelligence officials were investigating whether Page had opened private communication with senior Russian officials to discuss U.S. sanction policy under a possible administration. A campaign spokesman told Yahoo News that Page had no role in the campaign and that the campaign was not aware of any of his activities, past or present. On 2016, Page was formally removed from the campaign. Although Page had been removed from the campaign after the election, he sought a position in the Trump administration. On November 2016, he submitted an application to the transition team that inflated his credentials and experiences, stating that in his capacity as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, he had met with top world leaders and effectively responded to diplomatic outreach effort from senior government officials in Asia, Europe, Africa, and the America. Page received no response from the transition team. When Page took a personal trip to Moscow in December of 2016, he met again with at least one Russian government official. That interaction and a discussion of the December trip are set forth in Volume 1, Section 4.B.6 infra. Number 4. Dimitri Simes for the national interest. Members of the Trump campaign interacted on several occasions with the Center for the National Interest, CNI, principally through its president and chief executive officer, Dimitri Simes. CNI is a think tank with expertise in and connection to the Russian government. Simes was born in the former Soviet Union and in the United States in the 1970s. In April of 2016, candidate Trump delivered his first speech on foreign policy and national security at an event hosted by Press, a publication affiliated with CNI. Then Senator Jeff Sessions and Russian Ambassador Kislyak both attended the event, and as a result, it gained some attention in Sessions' confirmation hearing to become Attorney General. Sessions had various other contacts with CNI during the campaign period on foreign policy matters, including Russia. He also interacted with Simes about Russian issues during the campaign. The investigation did not identify evidence that the campaign passed or received any messages to or from the Russian government through CNI or Siemens. CNI and Dmitry Siemens connect with the Trump campaign. CNI is a Washington-based nonprofit organization that grew out of a center founded by President Richard Nixon. CNI describes itself as a voice for strategic realism in U.S. foreign policy and publishes a bi-monthly foreign policy magazine, The National. CNI is overseen by a board of directors and an advisory council that is largely honorary and whose members at the relevant time included Sessions, who served as an advisor to candidate Trump on national security and foreign policy issues. Dmitry Siemens is president and CEO of CNI and the publisher and CEO of the National Interest. Siemens was born in the former Soviet Union, immigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and joined CNI predecessor after working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Siemens personally has many contacts with current and former Russian government officials, as does CNI collectively. As CNI stated when seeking a grant from the Carnegie Corporation in 2015, has, quote, unparalleled access to Russian officials and politicians among Washington think tanks, in part because CNI has arranged for U.S. delegation to visit Russia and for Russian delegation to visit the United States as part of so-called quote unquote track 2 unquote diplomatic efforts. On March 14, 2016, CNI board member Richard Plepler organized a luncheon for CNI and its honorary chairman Henry Kissinger at the time Warner Building in New York. The idea behind the event was to generate interest in CNI's recruit new members for CNI. Along with Siemens, attendees at the event included Jared Kushner, son-in-law of candidate Trump. Kushner told the office that the event came at a time when the Trump campaign was having trouble securing support from experienced foreign policy professionals, and that, as a result, he decided to seek Siemens' assistance during the March 14 event. Siemens and Kushner again on a March 24, 2016 telephone call, 3 days after Trump had publicly named the team of foreign policy advisors that had been put together on short notice. On March 31, 2016, Siemens and Kushner had an in-person, one-on-one meeting in Kushner's New York office. During that meeting, Siemens told Kushner that the best way to handle foreign policy issues for the Trump campaign would be to organize an advisory group of experts to meet with candidate Trump and develop a foreign policy approach that was consistent with Trump's voice. Siemens believed that Kushner was receptive to that suggestion. Siemens also had contact with other individuals with the Trump campaign regarding the campaign foreign policy position. For example, on June 17, 2016, Siemens sent J.D. Gordon an email with a memo to Senator Sessions that we discussed at our recent meeting and asked Gordon to both read it and share it with Sessions. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption, quote, that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign issue, End of quote. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including a, quote, new beginning with Russia, end of quote. You may notice one thing reading the Mueller report. So far, we have been making a lot of progress in terms of volume 1. In fact, we kept more than 2/3 of volume 1. One thing jump at you reading the report. Now, of course, I haven't started reading volume 2, but the one common denominator. All the foreign policy, notice all the foreign policy advisor Trump had, only one focus: Russia. It's not about opening relationship with Iran. It's not about opening relationship or bettering relationship with. It's not about bettering relationship with other allies. It's none of that was on the table. There was only one common denominator. All the conversation focused on Russia. Usually a president would want to have broad foreign policy advisor about different parts of the world, but there was only one. So that's why you may have heard me mention that 100 people connected to the Trump who are connected to Russia or Russian who had some sort of relationship with Russia. No other place. Back. National interest host a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During both their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meetings, and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following those conversations, Simes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and that CNI official would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' Chief of Staff Rick DeBourne. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Simes in contact with senior policy advisor Stephen Mueller and forwarded to Simes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Mueller had prepared. Simes sent back to pen bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Byrd. CMS received subsequent draft outlines from Mueller, and Saunders spoke to Mueller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received a draft, CMS did not, and the email that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to CMS that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that CMS had mentioned during initial discussion with the campaign in order to address concern about security and capacity. On April 25, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invites would have the chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI's invitees, the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, CMS had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27, a receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, CMS stood next to Trump and introduced him to the invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. CMS perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, quote, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing," end of quote. Several public reports state that in addition to speaking to Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators that he did not remember any such conversation, nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the national interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech, or had the opportunity to do so. CMS, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event but then departed to Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. We will continue with the Mueller reading. We will continue with the Mueller for the reading of the Mueller report tomorrow, starting at 10. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again at the top of the hour. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, Place for Common Sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. See you in just a bit. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.